Today is April 2nd. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today, out of the Big Book, we're going to be reading personal story number 9. This will be the pioneer number 9, rather. This is the Keys to the Kingdom, pages 270 through 273. And out of the 12 and 12, we're going to continue our journey through step 11, page 101. Hope everyone's doing well today. Life is good over here. But anyways, enough of my rambling. Let's get to the good stuff. So, if you recall from yesterday's reading out of the Big Book, we got to a point where this poor woman from Chicago, she's really struggling. And the fascinating thing is, once again, this is about the second or third time that one of our friends have mentioned their childhood wasn't that bad. So we couldn't really blame the drinking on maybe any childhood trauma whatsoever, but something's wrong. There's some kind of void here that the alcohol for a time is filling for this woman until it turned on her in her late 20s and 30s. It's gotten so bad, as a matter of fact, that on page 270, she says, "By now, I wanted to die, but had lost the courage even to take my life. I was trapped. And for the life of me, I did not know how or why this had happened to me." So just really heartbreaking stuff. I mean, talk about desperate. Drinking for oblivion, contemplating suicide. I mean, that's how serious this malady can be. Again, how dark it is before the dawn. So we're going to build on this story today. Again, we're reading 270 through 273. Bottom of page 270. For about 1 year prior to this time, there was one doctor who had continued to struggle with me. He had tried everything from having me attend daily mass at 6 a.m. to performing the most menial labor for his charity patients. Why he bothered with me as long as he did, I shall never know. For he knew there was no answer for me in medicine, and he, like all doctors of his day, had been taught that the alcoholic was incurable and should be ignored. Doctors were advised to attend patients who could be benefited by medicine. With the alcoholic, they can only give temporary relief, and in the last stages, not even that. It was a waste of the doctor's time and the patient's money. Nevertheless, there were a few doctors who saw alcoholism as a disease and felt that the alcoholic was a victim of something over which he had no control. They had a hunch that there must be an answer for these apparently hopeless ones, somewhere. Fortunately for me, my doctor was one of the enlightened. And then, in the spring of 1939, a very remarkable book was rolled off the New York press with the title Alcoholics Anonymous. However, due to financial difficulties, the whole printing was, for a while, held up, and the book received no publicity, nor, of course, was it available in the stores, even if one knew it existed. But somehow my good doctor heard of this book, and he also learned a little bit about the people responsible for its publication. He sent to New York for a copy, and after reading it, he tucked it under his arm and called on me. That call marked the turning point in my life. Until now, I had never been told that I was an alcoholic. Few doctors will tell a hopeless patient that there is no answer for him or her. But this day, my doctor gave it to me straight. And he said, "People like you are pretty well known to the medical profession. Every doctor gets his quota of alcoholic patients. Some of us struggle with these people because we know that they are really very sick. But we also know that, short of some miracle, we are not going to help them except temporarily, and that they will inevitably get worse and worse until one of two things happens. Either they die of acute alcoholism, or they develop wet brains and have to be put away permanently." He further explained that alcohol was no respecter of sex or background, but that most of the alcoholics he had encountered had better than average minds and abilities. He said the alcoholics seemed to possess a native acuteness and usually excelled in their fields, regardless of environmental or educational advantages. We watch the alcoholic performing in a position of responsibility, and we know that because he's drinking heavily and daily, he has cut his capacities by 50%, and still he seems to be able to do a satisfactory job. And we wonder how much further this man could go if his alcoholic problem could be removed and he could throw 100% of his abilities into action. But of course, he continued, eventually the alcoholic loses all of his capacities as his disease gets progressively worse. And this is a tragedy that's painful to watch, the disintegration of a sound mind and body. Then he told me there was a handful of people in Akron and New York who had worked out a technique for arresting their alcoholism. He asked me to read the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and then he wanted me to talk with a man who was experiencing success with his own arrestment. This man could tell me more. I stayed up all night reading that book. For me, it was a wonderful experience. It explained so much that I had not understood about myself. And best of all, it promised recovery if I do a few simple things and to be willing to have the desire to drink removed. Here was hope. Maybe I could find my way out of this agonizing existence. Perhaps I could find freedom and peace and be able once again to call my soul my own. The next day, I received a visit from Mr. T, a recovered alcoholic. I don't know what sort of person I was expecting, but I was very agreeably surprised to find Mr. T a poised, intelligent, well-groomed, and mannered gentleman. I was immediately impressed with his graciousness and charm. He put me at ease with his first few words. Looking at him, I found it hard to believe that he had ever been as I was then. However, as he unfolded his story for me, I could not help but believe him. In describing his suffering, his fears, his many years of groping for some answer to that which always seemed to remain unanswerable, he could have been describing me, and nothing short of experience and knowledge could have afforded him that much insight. He had been dry for 2.5 years and had been maintaining his contact with a group of recovered alcoholics in Akron. Contact with this group was extremely important to him. He told me that eventually he hoped such a group would develop in the Chicago area, but that so far this had not been started. He thought it would be helpful for me to visit the Akron group and meet many like himself. All right, my friends, so we are already starting to see some hope here. So I'll definitely be coming back to this in just a minute. All right, my friends, so if you recall from the 12 and 12, we have been journeying the last few days through step 11, which is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And the last couple of days, we've been talking about meditation and breaking down the St. Francis prayer. So we're going to build on that idea on page 101. Once more, we read our prayer, and again we try to see what the inner essence is. We'll think now about the man who first uttered the prayer. First of all, he wanted to become a channel. Then he asked for the grace to bring love, forgiveness, harmony, truth, faith, hope, light, and joy to every human being that he could. Next came the expression of an aspiration and a hope for himself. He hoped, God willing, that he might be able to find some of these treasures too. This he would try to do by what he called self-forgetting. What did he mean by self-forgetting? And how did he propose to accomplish that? He thought it better to give comfort than to receive it. Better to understand than to be understood. Better to forgive than to be forgiven. This much could be a fragment of what is called meditation. Perhaps our very first attempt at a mood, a flyer into the realm of the spirit, if you like. It ought to be followed by a good look at where we stand now, and a further look at what might happen in our lives were we able to move closer to the ideal that we have been trying to glimpse. Meditation is something which can always be further developed. It has no boundaries, either of width or height. Aided by such instruction and example as we can find, it is essentially an individual adventure, something which each one of us works out in his own way. But its object is always the same: to improve our conscious contact with God, with His grace, wisdom, and love. And let's always remember that meditation in its reality is intensely practical. One of its first fruits is emotional balance. With it, we can broaden and deepen the channel between ourselves and God as we understand Him. All right, that concludes today's reading. Man, I love this page in the 12 and 12. Let me back up to the part where it talks about this being a personal thing. It's a broad category. Meditation for me is such a broad category, and I've never heard somebody say this is the way to meditate. I mean, maybe they're out there. I've just never heard them. And I love this part here. It says, aided by such instruction and example as we can find, it is essentially an individual adventure, something which each one of us works out in his or her own way. That's the thing. We all think differently. Metacognition, right? Thinking about thinking. We all have our process. We all have our different ways of going about things. We're all swimming to this island of peace, and we're all going to take our own route to get there, but the whole objective is to get there. And it says right here, but its object is always the same. What's the object? What's the whole goal here? To improve our conscious contact with God. For me, it's just improving my relationship with the God of my understanding. So what is going to connect me more to Him? Once I discover these things, I just want to keep doing them and discovering more things like that strengthen the relationship between me and my higher power with His grace, His wisdom, and His love. And let's always remember that meditation is in its reality intensely practical. That's interesting. Because it sounds kind of fluffy when you first hear the word meditation. What? Am I going to be doing some kind of yoga on a mountaintop somewhere? Not knocking those who do that to get their conscious contact, but that was the instant thing that I thought of. But for me, it's, I'll just give myself as an example here. It's being out in the wilderness. It's enjoying silence that I feel connected to the God of my understanding. It's journaling and flipping back through those journals every now and then and thinking about how God has worked in my life. That's meditation for me. It really is something that I'm just now learning to do. But it is something that I think has grown exponentially since sobriety. And I really owe the practical application of these steps in a stronger relationship that I have from my higher power. And going back to the big book real fast, oh man, we're already starting to see some hope here. I thank the God of my understanding for this particular doctor that went out of his way to learn more about Alcoholics Anonymous and somehow got a printing of the book because it was kind of obscure during this time due to financial difficulties. The whole printing was for a while held up and the book received no publicity at the time. But somehow this doctor, he was persistent. And he somehow got a copy of the book and he gives it to one of his patients, this lady right here. So it's pretty amazing how that all worked out for her. I see a miracle here unfolding. And speaking of miracles, this Mr. T, not the one you're probably thinking of, long before that one, this Mr. T shows up at this woman's house. And I love what the woman says here, that this alcoholic that was now sober was nothing like she pictured. And this woman's talking about how she was surprised by this Mr. T. And as soon as he starts talking about his malady and how he's recovering from it, this woman is absolutely fascinated and wants to learn more. And this man urges that this woman join the Akron group and really preaches the fellowship. So we can certainly see that there is hope. I love this line right here after she reads the big book. It explains so much that I had not understood about myself. And best of all, it promised recovery if I would do just a few simple things and be willing to have the desire to drink removed. And I love the next line. Here was hope. Maybe I could find my way out of this agonizing existence. Perhaps I could find freedom and peace and be able once again to call my soul my own. man, that is a great way to end today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, my friends. I hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing y'all back here tomorrow.